All right, Shabbos, let us begin. So we are picking up Emirat Hashem. Today's daf. All right. Well, the truth is, it's Tuesday's daf that Emirat Hashem we are doing today. Daf Tes Vov. So we are starting at the Mishnah on Tes Vov Amud Aleph. Hareini Nazir l'chishieli ben. A person says, and I will say this seems to be at first glance reminiscent of the cases that we've had up until this point in time. I am going to become a Nazir when I have a son. When I have a son, the Nazir mea yom, and I'm also going to be a Nazir for 100 days. So what's the halacha? Nolad lo ben ad shivim lo hifsid klum. This is very interesting. So we're going to see that there is a fundamental machlokes about how to interpret this particular phrase in the Mishnah. So let's just read it. If his son was born ad shivim, up till 70 days after he began his Nazirah. So remember again, this is once again the situation of concurrent Naziros. So again, we have a guy, I'm going to be a Nazir when I have a son, part one, and ultimately again, I'm a Nazir 100 days. So like in the previous cases as well, he started his 100-day Naziros already. He began that already. So now what happens? So now his son is born. So the shaila is, okay, so now what happens with the Naziros that he observed beforehand, and what happens afterwards? So the Mishnah says it depends. If he's observed up to 70 days already, lo hifsid klum, he hasn't lost anything. Now both say, pashat pshat over here is not lost anything means as follows. We learned in the previous sugya, when can you pause and restart a neder? When can you pause and restart a neder? When there's enough on the back end of the neder for what we call gidul seyar, growth of hair. What's the definition for growth of hair? 30 days. So in other words, you could stop, pause a neder, and then resume the neder after observing another period of Nazirus, as long as there is at least 30 days on the remainder of that Nazir. The remainder of that neder, excuse me. Okay, so the Mishnah goes on. So the Mishnah says as follows, La'achar shivim, but however, again, after 70 days, which means I will say, in this case, you've observed more than 70 days of the 100-day Nazirus already, then sosar shivim. Then ultimately again, halacha l'maisa, you can't pause the neder and resume it afterwards. Why not? She'in taglachas pachos mishloshim yom. Because remember again, there's no hair growth, literally no hair cutting, less than 30 days. Less than 30 days. So bepashtos, what the Mishnah seems to be saying is as follows: that halacha l'maisa, you took a neder to say, you took a neder Nazirus, and when I'm going to go to Nazir when my son is born, halacha l'maisa, and then I'm going to be a Nazir for 100 days. So now I started the 100-day neder Nazirus, and now my son is born. So the shaila is what happens over here. So let's take the Pasha Pshat, which is Rashi's Pshat and everyone else's Pshat, which is that halacha l'maisa, you could pause the 100-day Nazirus, essentially as long as what? As long as what? You have at least 30 days left on it. Then pause it, observe the duration for your son, and then go ahead and observe the rest of the Nazirus afterwards. As long as you have a minimum of 30 days, you are good to go. Less than 30 days, you would not be able to pause the Nazirus because there would not be enough left over on the back end in order to make it something significant. Fine. The Rush happens to have a different girsa in this Mishnah, which we're gonna simply stick with the Pasha Pshat. Says the Gemara, Amarav, Yom Shivim Ol Lakan Lakan. What about day 70 itself? What about day 70 itself? So day 70 itself, so now remember again, here's what we've established. If halacha l'maisa, you began the 100-day Nazirus, and Ruvain's wife gives birth on day 70, right? Or I should say, within the first 70 days, it's fine. Pause the 100-day Nazirus, observe the Nazirus for the baby, and then when you finish the Nazirus for the baby, observe the remaining 30 days. Good to go. What happens, halacha l'maisa, if Rachel gives birth on day 70 itself? So Rav says that day 70 counts in both directions, which is interesting. So day 70, Rabbi say, essentially what Rav seems to be saying is, day 70 can count towards the 100-day Nazirus, and it could also count as what? Day number 1 of the Nazirus for the birth of his son. One day having a dual identity. Says the Gemara. Listen to this. So Tanan, no lo at shivim lo hifsid klum. Ultimately, the Mishnah says, if the baby was born up until the 70th day, then he hasn't lost anything from the 100-day Nazirus that he's observed, or the 7 days of the 100-day Nazirus. But if day 70 works for both the 100-day Nazirus as well as as well as for the Nazirus, for the birth of his son, isgure miskar, then ultimately, again, not only does he not lose anything, but rather he actually gains. Ela bedinhu delo lisni ad shivim. In reality, the Mishnah should not have said that. The Mishnah shouldn't have said, because the way the Mishnah reads is, it makes it sound like, as long as his wife gave birth, up to the 70th day, then halacha lamaisa, it counts. Halacha lamaisa, it counts, ultimately, again, towards the 70-day Nazirus. But more than 70 days, or the 70th day, it would not count towards the Nazirus. To which the Gemara says, no, it doesn't mean to say that. Rather, ela bedinhu delo lisni at shivim, umishum diktani seifa, Achar shivim soser shivim, but rather since the second part of the Mishnah said that if she gives birth after 70 days, and therefore there's less than 30 days left on the Nazirus, then Allah Chalamais, again, it won't work. Katani Reisha shivim, ultimately, again, for Mishnaic symmetry, ultimately, the beginning of the Mishnah also wrote shivim. So let's pause here for just a moment, just to clarify what we've got going on. It's not complicated, we just have to hold cup. So remember, what's the case? The case is, Reuven saying, I'm going to be a Nazir when my wife gives birth to a boy. And also, what's part two? Part two, I'm going to be a Nazir for 100 days. What does he do? He begins the 100-day Nazirus. Then what happens? Mazel tov, his wife gives birth. What's the shaila? The shaila is, how do we reconcile this? What the Mishnah is teaching is that halacha l'maisa, as long as he has at least 30 days left on the 100-day Nazirus, we could pause the 100-day one, observe the period for your son, and then observe the following 30 days afterwards. That works. Rav introduces the idea that day 70 itself has a dual identity. Day 70 itself has a dual identity, and day 70 could count as part of one day of the 100-day Nazirus, but also what? Day one of the Nazirus for the son. So it says the Gemara, Katani Reisha, Katani Reisha Shivim, fine. Tashma mi Seifa, look at the Seifa, no lod achar shivim soser. So we'll say the halacha is, right, we learned in the Braisa, take a look at the Seifa, that if the baby was born after 70 days, then what? Soser, ultimately again, Soser Shivim, it goes ahead and deconstructs whatever was observed up until that point in time. My acher, so we'll say, what does acher mean? Acher. It doesn't mean immediately the 70th day, rather it means sometime after the 70th day. To which the Gemara says, Aval acher mamish mai, but what about literally the day after? So the Gemara says, Hachanami delo saser. The reality is that would not deconstruct the original days observed either. If that's the case, Ihachi, my area detani nolad ad shivim lo hifsid klum. Why does the Mishnah say that if she gave birth up until 70 days of the 100-day Nazirus, that he hasn't lost anything? Afilu achar shivim nami. Even after the 70th day, technically, it shouldn't deconstruct anything. Ha'amrit lo saser. Elashmamina achar mamish. But rather, again, learn that when the Mishnah says achar literally means immediately after the 70 days. V'chein masnisin l'rav shma mina. And ultimately, again, what you can see from the Mishnah is that the Mishnah ultimately does not hold like the statement of Rav. So I will say, Rav wanted to just put out there that day number 70 could count, has a dual identity, ultimately could count as the 70th day within the 100-day Nazirus count, and day one ultimately again of the Nazirus associated with the birth of the son. To which the Gemara asks, you saw this the Kasha. V'Rav, kiman amra l'shmaite. I will say, where does Rav get this concept? That halacha l'maisa, one day can have a dual identity? Right? Where does he get this concept from? So this is incredible. Maybe it's from the following halacha. And I will say this is actually a fascinating halacha. Listen to this. Disnan. Because we learned the following halacha. Hakovres meso, shloshim yamim koldim l'regel. If a person buries his dead, person loses a loved one, and he buries his deceased relative 3 days before Yom Tiv. Now, remember again, major distinction in Hilchos Haves and laws of mourning between Shabbos and Yom Tiv, which is what? Shabbos counts as part of Shiva. Ultimately, again, Yom Tiv stops Shiva. So remember again, here's the interesting point that the Gemara is making. If a person observed at least 3 days of Shiva before Yom Tiv, and then Yom Tiv came and went ahead and stopped the Shiva, so Yom Tiv ends Shiva. Shiva's done. A truncated Shiva. So I'll tell you, the first Levaya I ever performed, going back now, I don't know, probably almost like 23 years ago. My first Levaya I ever did was on an Erev Sukkis 1 hour before Yom Tiv. 1 hour before Yom Tiv. It was a man who had lost his wife, and again, an older couple, wife was very sick, literally again 2 hours, and it was a 3-day Yom Tiv. It was a 3-day Yom Tiv. So we were able to pull everything together, do the Levaya right at the obviously at the Beis HaKvaros. The husband sat for maybe 5 minutes at the cemetery, and that was it. And then that was the end of Shiva. He was again, that rocked it. So that's this halach over here. Now the truth is here, the Gemara is phrasing it as 3 days. And in reality, it's halach l'mais, it's even less than 3 days. Even 10 minutes of Shiva goes ahead and brings to an end to the Shiva. Shmona, Yom Kol Regel. What if a person observed 8 days prior to Yom Tiv? Now what's 8 days? 8 days means Shiva, and Rabbosai, the first day of Shloshim. Then what? But lamimenu gzir shel. Then when Yom Tiv comes, Yom Tiv cuts off shloshim. In other words, what Yom Tiv does is, Yom Tiv ends whatever period of avelus you are currently in. So if you're in Shiva, Yom Tiv ends Shiva. You're in shloshim, Yom Tiv ends shloshim. Whatever stage you're in. Now again, if you're already 8 days into your mourning, then halacha l'maisa, not only does Yom Tiv end Shloshim, but you could actually take a haircut and shave before the arrival of Yom Tiv as well. But if you did not go ahead and take a haircut before Yom Tiv, then asul saper achar regel. Then ultimately, again, you can't take a haircut after Yom Tov. In other words, the Rush explains that essentially the laws of shloshim come back and devolve upon you. What's the logic behind that? So the logic behind that is, look, if you don't care enough about Yom Tiv to take advantage of the opportunity to shave and to groom yourself, then the halacha says we'll just slap you back with the halachos of shloshim. Okay, now we'll say Amud Beis. Here we go. Now this is interesting. What does that do with our sugya? So Abba Shaul says, "Im lo siper kol d'ma regel." Even if a person did not go ahead and take a haircut before Yom Tiv, even if a person did not take a haircut before, Shalom Aleichem, Milt Gerdner and Pinchas Fader. Incredible, wonderful to see you both. And Jeremy Lassen. Although Jeremy Lassen's supposed to be here, isn't he? I don't know what's going on over here. All right, good. The shver is on, Jeremy. So, all right. Jeremy, you're coming on Yarchei Kala, right? He's not sure. Okay, good. So it says, the Gemara says as follows. So Abba Shaul says, "Afilo siper kodim haregel." Even if halacha lemaisa, you did not take a haircut before Yom Tiv, mutal saper acha haregel. You're allowed to take a haircut after Yom Tiv. Why? Shekashem shemitzvah shlosha Shekashem shemitzvah shlosha mivatelas gzeras shiva. Kach mitzvahs shiva mivatelas gzeras lamed. So we'll say Abba Shaul says, look, halacha l'maisa, bottom line, whether you did shave or you didn't shave, there's a halacha. What's the halacha? Once Yom Tiv comes, Yom Tiv ends whatever stage of avelus you are currently in. Whatever stage you're in, Yom Tiv ends that. So you're in Shiva, Yom Tiv ends Shiva. You're in Shloshim, and I will say this is halacha l'maisa. You're in Shloshim, Yom Tiv ends Shloshim. Whether you shaved, you didn't shave, Yom Tiv ends it. Good. Says the Gemara, my time with Abba Shaul. So we'll say, why does Abba Shaul hold this way? He says, Lab mishum tekasavri shvi'i ola lekanu lekan. They'll say, now Abba Shaul's idea, right? Abba Shaul's idea is that halacha l'maisa, essentially, the day number seven counts. So we'll say, so I want to point out over here, if you notice, the way Abba Shaul phrases it, I'm sorry, I read it too quickly. So Abba Shaul says, if you observe 3 days of Shiva, so Yom Tiv will come and end your Shiva. That was stage, right, part 1. Part 2 of his statement was, and if you are 7 days into your Avelos, then what? Then Yom Tiv will end your Shloshim. You hear that? So ask the Gemara, Abba Shaul, but 7 days is still Shiva. So how could it be that if Yom Tiv comes on day number 7, or Erev Yom Tiv comes on day number 7, that ends your Shloshim? To which the Gemara says, my time with Abba Shaul, Lav Mishum Takasavri, here we go, Shvi'i Ola, Lekan Ulekan. It must be that what? Abba Shaul holds, I will say that day number 7, remember this goes back to what we learned before, day number 7 counts for both. Day number 7 counts as the last day of Shloshim and the last day of Shiva and the first day of Shloshim. A dual identity to the day. Now, remember again, why are we bringing this up now? Let's take a step back. What did Rav say? Rav wanted to suggest that in this case of the guy who says, I'm a Nazir, when my wife gives birth, right, to a boy, and I'm also a Nazir for 100 days. He started the 100 days. So Rav wanted to suggest that if she gives birth on day 70 can count both ways. So we're just trying to figure out, where does Rav come up with this idea that one day can have a dual identity? That's our fundamental shaila. So see, maybe the makar, maybe the source for it is Avelos. Abba Shal was saying that the 7th day of mourning counts both as the last day of Shiva and the first day of Shloshim. To which the Gemara says, Dilma ad, so maybe not. So we want to say it's in the makar. The Gemara says, Dilma ad kan lo kamar Rabbi Shal ella ba'avelos zayin dirabanan. So up until this point in time, Abba Shal says only by Avelos. In other words, we'll say the laws of mourning are dirabanan. So maybe Abba Shal holds that halacha l'maisa, it's only in dine dirabanan that we could repurpose a day, or that a day could have a dual identity. Aval benazir da'araisa lo, but nazir, which is a din da'araisa, maybe not. Aval nazir da'araisa lo. The Gemara says, I'm sorry. Lo, ella Rav Damar Rabbi Yossi. So we'll say, so now we're still just looking for a makar, right? Rav is saying day number 7 can count as a dual identity. We're trying to figure out the source for that. We wanted to say that maybe it was Abba Sha'ul by Avelos, but now we're saying, but Avelos is Dirabanan. Nazir is Doraisa. So maybe you can't learn it out. Here we go. We'll say, ella Rav Damar Rabbi Yossi. Rather, Rav holds like Rabbi Yossi. Disanya, Rabbi Yossi says, Shomeres Yom Keneged Yom Sheshachtu V'Zarku Ala B'Sheni Shalah. So we'll say a very interesting case here. Listen to this. So Rabbi Yossi says, a Shomeres Yom Keneged Yom. Now remember again, what's a Shomeres Yom Keneged Yom? We've learned this extensively. A woman is a Nida. Remember again, in the Da'oraisa model. We actually did this at Smichas Chaver. Woman is, remember, in Halacha operates on a 7-11 model, which means that 7 days a woman becomes a Nida. After the 7 days, any bleeding that she experiences for the next 11 days is Zava. A woman has a Re'iyah, a Zava Re'iyah, which is just a non-Nida Re'iyah, non-Nida emission. So she has that on a day. What's the halacha? She has to observe one clean day corresponding to the day in which she had a Re'iyah. If she goes out and she has 2 Re'iyos, what's the halacha? Shiva Nikiyim, 7 clean days. 3 Re'iyos ultimately requires a carbon. So listen to this case. Shomeres Yom Keneged Yom Sheshachtu B'Zarka Ala B'Sheni Shalah. If you have a Shomeres Yom, which means a woman who is observing a corresponding clean day, corresponding to a day in which she had a Re'iyah. So what's the halacha? We'll say, take a look at Rashi for just a moment over here. Sheshachtu v'zarku ala b'sheni shala. Look at Rashi. Shekvar ra'asa b'yom shmini ad shelo ra'asa b'yom tishi'i he shomeres kinegdo leida im tir'ena b'gimel yomim be'ziyos. So we'll say, listen to this. So now halacha l'maisa. This is talking about a situation where she had a Re'iyah on day number 7, and now, Zevi, just Photoshop a tie, if you don't mind. I forgot. Okay. And so now what happened? I figured there's no tie thing, and now my chaverim show up with ties. It's like tie shaming over here. And I'll say, so again, I'm standing my ground on this one. We'll come out for Shabbos. So let's say, so the Gemara says as follows. So you have a shirt. I'm sorry? This shirt is clean, for now at least. So the Gemara says as follows. Shomeres Yom Keneged Yom. So remember again, you have a woman who's observing a clean day, right, corresponding ultimately again to a day on which she bled. Sheshachtu v'zarka ala b'sheni shalah. So they went ahead, and I will say, this is Karban Pesach. So what happened over here is, they offered up Karban Pesach on her behalf. Okay? So b'sheni shalah. And I will say, now just to show you what happened over here. We'll call her Rachel, right? Rachel, it's on day number 8 of her cycle. Right now, not her menstrual cycle, just the monthly cycle. What's the status if she bleeds on day number 8? What parsha is she in? What parsha? Zava. So she sees on day number 8. What's her halacha now? She has to observe one clean day. So day number 9 has to be a clean day, a day without any day without any discharge. Fine. So what happens? Also happens to be that day number 9 is Erev Pesach. So what did they do? Now remember again, in order to partake of Karban Pesach, what do you need? You have to be tar. So now what happens? So they included her in a chabura. So they included her in a chabura, right? So shachta v'zarku ala b'sheni shalah v'achar kach ra'asa. And then I will say what happens after the shechta the Karban Pesach on day number 9, right? Erev Pesach, she has another re'iyah, another emission. Before shkia, another emission. So what's the halacha? Harezu eina ocheles. So I will say obviously she's not allowed to eat. Right? She's not allowed to eat from the Karban Pesach. Why can't she eat from the Karban Pesach? Why not? Because remember, when she has a re'iyah on day number 9, what's that? That's a kana shalom aleichem, baruch haba. Right? When she has a re'iyah on day number 9, so what's the halacha? What's the halacha? She now needs another clean day. But the point is, comes Pesach night, she's tmeya. She's Tameya. So this is a fascinating case. So again, just to review the timeline over here. Day number 8, which means the 7 days of, we'll call it, of menstrual cycle have finished. Right? This is all biblical law, not D'Rabbanan. D'Rabbanan is totally different. Right? But in biblical law, then after 7 days, now in day number 8 and on, she's in Zavaland. Right? In Zavaland. Right? So what happens in Zavaland? That means so now, day number 8, which is first day of potential zivus, she bleeds. Or she has an emission. Then what happens? What's her halacha? She has to observe one clean day, which is day number 9. Day number 9 so far also happens to be what? Erev Pesach. No problem. She's fine. She's clean. They include her as part of a chabura, as part of a group of Karban Pesach. They include her. They shechted for her. Right? Wonderful. Everything's going great. Until when? Until after the shechita of the Karban Pesach, what happens? She has another re'iyah. So we'll say, which is fine, but now what's her status? Tmeya. What does she need now? She needs a clean day. Which day? Day 10, right? Which was also happens to be which day? First day Pesach. So we'll say, so what's the halacha? Harezu ena ocheles, such a great case. Harezu ena ocheles, so she can't eat the Karban Pesach. We'll say, right? Why can't she eat the Karban Pesach? Because the night of Pesach, she's Tmeya. So she can't eat the Karban Pesach. Upetura mila asos Pesach sheni. And she also, but here's what's interesting is, she does not have to bring Pesach Sheni. What's remembering again? What's Pesach Sheni? Pesach Sheni is the makeup date, right? If you were Tameh, or B'derech Rechokah too far away, you have a makeup date. So she is not obligated in Pesach Sheni. Then I both say, now here's what's interesting. Why is she not obligated in Pesach Sheni? My time in Rabbi Yossi, listen to this. Lav mishum dakasavar miktsas hayom kekulo. So I both say, this is wild. Get ready for this. Maybe Rabbi Yossi, are you ready? Right, good, David. You're in charge of ruach for the trip, right? And also by the way, attendance. We're gonna crack down on this. So listen to this. So now remember again. So watch this. Why does Rabbi Yossi hold that she's patur from Karban Pesach? In other words, why should she be exempt from Pesach Sheni? After all, again, did she get to eat Pesach Rishon? Did she get to eat Karban Pesach? No. So what? Right? Because she was Tameya. So why is she exempt? So say, this is incredible. Maybe Rabbi Yossi was like this. Miktsas Yom Kekulo. Part of the day counts as the whole. Now, what does the day part of the day count? So I'll say, get ready for this. Remember, what was the first day she had an emission? First day was day number 8. Right? Now what happens? Now she's observing day number 9 as a clean day. Shabbos said, watch this. Now remember, then Karban Pesach is shechted on her back. She's part of the Chabura. Then after the Pesach was shechted, what happens? Another emission. Maybe Rabbi Yossi was like this. Part of the day counts as the whole. So watch this. Essentially, day number 9 is a clean day. It's counted halachically as a fully clean day. Which means that halachically we look at it as if what? For the entirety of day number 9, she was tahora, fit to eat Karban Pesach, and then essentially the fact that she was unable to eat occurs later on Pesach itself. And therefore halacha l'maisa, yes?
So why would that be true even if she saw before the Shechita on day number 9? Isn't it because at the Shas Shechita she still didn't?
Correct. So at the Shas, well, Mixas Kukulo, because before she's, the Mixas Kukulo.
Or because B'Shas Shechita she was Re'uya.
Right, because Mixas Yom Kikulo, in other words, they have to work together. Mixas Yom Kikulo say part of the day counts as the whole, or for our purposes, in our jargon over here in this Gemara, a day could have a dual identity. Essentially, at the time she shechted the Karban, or the Karban Pesach was shechted, she was Tahora. So it's both. In other words, it's the Mixas Yom Kikulo.
Mixas Yom Kikulo, if she saw at 10 o'clock in the morning, and the Shechita is in the afternoon.
No, that's not what we're talking about.
Right.
She had 3-4 hours that she was Tahora.
I know, but the Pashas, it only works if at the, she has to be Re'uya. She has to be Re'uya at the Shas. Correct. But I'm saying that they're working together. She has to be Re'uya at Shas Shechita, but also mixes. In other words, I'm saying, here's what we're trying to nail down. Why is she not obligated in Pesach Sheni? That's what's bothering us, right? That's the part I don't understand. So the only way to understand it is it must be that since she was Ru'uya for part of Erev Pesach, it makes it as if Ki'ilu, she was Ru'uya the entire Erev Pesach. And who's Chayiv in Pesach Sheni? Only if you are not Ru'uy on Erev Pesach. An incredible Chiddush. To which the Gemara says, one second, Mimai. Maybe Rabbi Yossi just holds that the way that Tumah works in these kind of situations is only going forward. And maybe it's not Miksasim Kagulo, but maybe it's just the nature of Tumah is such that you are Tahar until you are actively Tameh. And we do not allow the Tumah that occurred now to kind of define the identity of the day retroactively. Umisa Rabbi Yossi, does Rabbi Yossi actually hold this way? But Rabbi Yossi says, interesting case, Zav bal shtei re'iyos. Well, so you know that wherever there's a Zava, the Zav is never far behind, right? Zav, right? You can't. First of all, you can't start a Yachi Kala without a Zav. Right? That's number one. There has to be, right? So let's say, here you go. So it says the Gemara. So Rabbi Yossi Omer Zav bal shtei re'iyos. Listen to this. So a Zav bal shtei re'iyos. So remembering, what's the halacha with a Zav who has two emissions consecutively, right? In 2 consecutive days. What's the halacha? He's obligated to count Shiva Nikiyim, but no carbon. No carbon. Carbon only comes after 3 re'iyos. So zav bal shtei re'iyos sheshachtu v'zarku alav b'shvi'i. So listen to this. You have a zav who had 2 re'iyos, and what happens? They shechted on his behalf, the Karban Pesach on his behalf, v'zarku alav b'shvi'i, on day number 7. V'chein shomeres yom kineged yom. Sheshachtu v'zarku aleh. So, same case. That's the case of Shomer Yom Kineged Yom, right? She had the Re'iyah on day number 8. And then again, day number 9, they shechted on her behalf. And what was V'achar kach ro? And afterwards, in both of these cases, they had a Re'iyah. Afa pisha metamin mishkav Moshe l'mafreya. Even though they have the ability to be metamin mishkav Moshe, which Rabbi says is the unique halacha by a zav, that when a zav ultimately, again, sits on something, he conveys, or she conveys tumah to many layers below them. Peturin mila'asas Pesach Sheni. Ultimately, again, they are pater from Pesach Sheni. So, Maila Mafreya. So, what does it mean, the Mafreya? Midrabanon. It only means Midrabanon. Hachinami mistabra. If you would think that it's a din daraisa, amai petur milasos Pesach Sheni. Why would they be exempt from Pesach Sheni? The olam emelacha tuma daraisa. I will say, in reality, what we have to say is that no, midaraisa tuma extends the Mafreya. Tuma actually does extend retroactively. But here's what's different. Tahom deziva hitiru. They will say this is a different kind of halacha. This, the Gemara says that halacha l'maisa tahom, what we call tumas tahom. Tumas tahom is literally, again, a tumah which emanates from inside of the body. Paradigmatic example of that would be zav. Zav. So a tumas tahom is different. They're matter. But if you look at the Rush for just a moment, so the Rush says over here, the Rush says, va'amrinan beketza tolim tumas hatom etir. If you see where Tosfos Hatahom is? See where that Tosfos Hatahom? If you go right to the right in the Rush, right? So look at Tosfos Hatahom. I'm sorry, it's so small. And then again, right to the right. The Tumas Hatahom Hitiru Kibepesach. Chazal were matter Tumas Tahom by Pesach. Namely what? What does that mean? He says, called Tumas Safek correlate Tumas Hatahom Kemoshat Tahom Mechusa Ve'ein Adam Yodea Mayeshbo. So the Gemara is suggesting over here that maybe by Karban Pesach there's a different halacha, which is that any Tumah which emanates from inside, from the Tahom, from the depths, i.e. an obscure Tumah, ultimately again will not go ahead and disqualify you from having participated in the Shechita of Pesach Rishon and relegate you to an obligation of Pesach Sheni. Different halacha. Va'af Rabbi Oshia Savar Mafrei Midrabanan. Even Rabbi Oshia holds that this din of Tumah Mafrei is only Dirabanan. Desanya Rabbi Oshia Amar. So aval haroeh zav b'shvi'i shalo. If a person goes ahead and sees a zav emission, ultimately again on his 7th day, es shalafanov va'amar. Soser es shalafanov. It goes ahead and deconstructs and obliterates any of the days that he observed before. And Rabbi Yochanan lo nistar ela yomo. No, the only thing ultimately again that he loses out on is that day itself. Manav shach. I don't understand that. Isasar kulasasar. If you're going to tell me that the Re'iyah goes ahead and deconstructs the days, it should deconstruct all of the days. Ilo sasar, lo nistar, velo yomo. And if a day doesn't deconstruct, then it shouldn't deconstruct anything. Ela ema, lo nistar, velo yomo. Rather, ultimately say that Allah l'maisa what? It should not go ahead and deconstruct anything. Lo nistar velo yomo. It should not go ahead and deconstruct either the day or anything that came before it. Fine. So the Gemara's top of Tez Zayin Abosai. V'amarlei Rabbi Yossi Kai kavasech, the Amr mikano lahaba metame. Shabbos say, he said to him, but does Rabbi Yossi hold like you? Rabbi Yossi who says mikano lahaba metame. From this point in forward, ultimately the tumah extends, but not retroactively. V'ha Rabbi Yossi lemafreya hu da amar. But Rabbi Yossi ultimately said that the tumah extends lemafreya. And Shabbos say, take a quick look at the Rush. I'm sorry that we're going so quickly, but take a look at the Rush. Top Rush on Tes Zayin Amud Aleph. Right, so Rabbi Yossi michti kasar miksasum kukulo zava gimura heichim mishkachas la. Oh, sorry, getting a little ahead of ourselves. To which the Gemara says, "V'ha Rabbi Yossi mafreya d'amar, ma'ila mafreya midrabanan." What does Rabbi Yossi mean when he says that the tumah extends l'mafreya? Ultimately, again, it means it extends l'mafreya midrabanan, only rabbinically. So Rabbi say, okay, so fine. Now the Gemara circles back. Let's analyze this for just a moment. So Rabbi say, here's what we have, and this is actually quite a fascinating halacha, which is the halacha ma'aser Karban Pesach. By Karban Pesach, the halacha is that as long as you are fit to offer up the Karban Pesach at the time the Karban Pesach is being shechted, as long as that, right? As long as you're fit while it's shechted, halacha l'maisa, even if something happens which precludes you from partaking it, you do not have to bring Pesach Sheni. Very interesting halacha. So as long as you are fit at the zman of shchita, even if something happened afterward, ultimately again, you're okay. Now the Gemara is asking over here. Let's analyze this Rabbi Yossi, right? So now we wanted to suggest that maybe Rabbi Yossi holds that by a zava, right? She sees on day 8, so she's now observing day number 9 as a day of Tara, and now she sees on day number 9. So we're suggesting that maybe the reason she doesn't have to bring another Pesach Sheni is because Mixas Yom Kikulo, which means day number 9 will ultimately act as a clean day. To which the Gemara says, but according to that, Rabbi Yossi Michti Savra Mixas Kikulo Zava Gimura Demaisi Karban Hechi Mishkachasla. Now let's say, listen to this Shaila. If that is true, that halacha l'maisa, every time a woman observes a partial day of purity, a partial day of Tara, that mitzvahs and gekulo, then Abba say what? There's no such thing as Zava Gedola. Right? Why? What does Zava Gedola require? 3 consecutive days. But if Miksas Yom Kekulo says that part of the day counts as the whole, then as long as she observes some amount of time, as Dr. Cannon was saying before as well, as long as she observes some amount of time of Tara in the morning, then what? That counts as a day of Tara. Well, if it's a day of Tara, then it interrupts the continuity of the Re'iyos, in which case there should never be a such thing as a Zava Gedola, to which the Gemara says, so mix of Zava Gimura Demaisi Karban Hechi Mishkachas La Kevan Dechazi Bepalga Diyama Ida Palga Diyama Salik Le L'Shimar. Because again, even if she sees on part of the day that she did not see ultimately counts as a clean day. So we'll say, how are you ever going to have a case of a contiguous Zava Gedola of 3 consecutive Re'iyos? Such a good kasha. We'll say the simple answer is that Allah Chalamaysa, she flows 3 days continuously. Okay, that's the simplest answer, which ultimately again makes sense because halacha l'maisa, again under those circumstances, then there's no break. So because there's no break, therefore halacha l'maisa she's a Zava Gedola. The other possibility is dechazya tlasa yomi samach l'shkia sachama. It's very interesting. She saw 3 consecutive days right before shkia. The lahavi shows the cycle l'minyana. Because Rabbi say, listen to this. What does that do? If you see 3 days right before shkia, so ultimately again halacha l'maisa, there's no subsequent time that could go ahead and count as a day of Shimor. If you're seeing 3 consecutive days right before sunset, then halacha l'maisa, again, there's no time then that could be counted as a clean day, and therefore there are no interruptions in her riyos. So I'll just mention, just interestingly enough, so I want to point out this Mishnah, the Mishnah itself doesn't really bring down a halacha that's so contrary to what we learned before, but what I will point out is something incredible, like on a hashkafic level. Rav advances this idea, which we see in other areas of halacha as well, which is that one day can have a dual identity. Now in Rav's case, the way Rav wanted to set it up was day number 70 could count as the 70th day of the 100-day Nazirus, and what? And day 1 of the Neder Nazirus triggered by the birth of the child. We saw other examples of it now, right? Day number 7 could potentially count as the last day of Shiva and first day of Shloshim. So you could see ultimately how one day both say. So, and we paskin that. We halacha l'maisa a number of different areas in halacha. What I will point out is something amazing. I will say this idea, not only do we paskin that way halacha l'maisa, but as we mentioned this morning, we also paskin that way hashkafa l'maisa. I will say, a day could have a dual identity. What does this mean? We've all had days that start out really bad. Or we have days in which we severely mess up. And early on in the day, and we'll say, let's be honest, we're amongst friends, right? How do we feel in those moments after you know that you know what, you've really messed up? How do you feel about the day? How do you feel about the day? Sunk cost. Sunk cost. It's done. And I will say, when we begin to feel that way, it's important to hear the words of Rav, that a day can be ola lekan ulekan. One day could be lekan. You're right. I started off really bad. I made some really terrible mistakes. But lamaisa, I could salvage it also. A day has the ability to possess a dual identity. And that dual identity could say the day could be, even if it started l'ra, it could still be l'tov. And this is whatever. This is not just true if you mess up in the beginning of the day. It's true if you mess up in the end of the day. And it's true if you mess up even at the end of the day. As long as you have what? As long as you could salvage it. See, what do you learn from this last sugya? As long as you have a little bit of time before Shkia. Right? As long as you have a little bit of time before sunset, you could repurpose and salvage the identity of any day. No day is beyond salvation. Every single day is ola lekan ulekan. No matter how bad it starts, you always have the ability to turn it around. Rabbi say, Hadron Allah, Hareini Nazir. Mazel tov. Wow, what a way. Mazel tov, mazel tov. Shkayach, Rabbi say. No. Yeah, it's okay. It's all right. What?